like hereby to welcome you to the Go Digital seminar and address one of the points I was asked to address as chair of the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance in the Council of Europe, a monitoring body that for this monitoring cycle is focusing part of its reports to inclusive education. And therefore, for us, how COVID-19 influenced access to education and education as a human right was extremely important. And this will be my initial remarks when it comes to COVID-19 pandemic and education, and how digital platforms, digital online education might help, but also could create problems if it's not done in an inclusive way in this current crisis. As we all know, COVID-19 pandemic is not yet over. We are in the actual crisis still, second wave of COVID-19. And we do know for sure that the lockdown that happened in a number of states all over the world has impacted greatly on equality and education. First of all, I would like to remind us all that last December, a team from Crete came to Strasbourg and had the opportunity to actually discuss with members of our monitoring body, the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, on at the time ALICE program on prosociality, and how the digital platforms, the digital world toolkits have helped create bonds among students and among students and teachers, which is the ultimate goal of education. I would also like to begin by mentioning 10 reasons why COVID-19 pandemic impacted greatly education as a human right. Most of these were negative developments, which we will have to take into account in order to be wiser in the beginning of this school year. So these 10 let's say points, aspects, 10 consequences were put forward by a specific survey done by UNESCO, or asked by UNESCO to different teachers, schools and monitoring bodies. And according to this research, one of the most important consequences of COVID-19 pandemic to education was the fact that you could not always have access to learning, substantial learning, because there was no access to the devices as such in a number of houses, homes, areas, because sometimes there was not even electricity, because there was very scarce space. Imagine a family having 5 or 6 children, how many devices they would need, how quick connection and internet would be, and also at times internet fatigue was, and still is in my opinion, in the beginning of this school year, a huge challenge. So we have to manage platforms in a way that is creative, easy to use, and creates a feeling that there is inclusiveness. So we have to make sure that learning continues, and not just learning, but also development of pupils. Because especially for younger children, what we need to make sure is that they feel connected to their peers and they feel connected to their teachers. Secondly, and this is something equally important, we should not forget the actual physical needs of children. We should know, and we should be able to know within each school what are the real needs of the families. Maybe several children had these free lunches at school, and therefore they had issues of access to actual food. if schools would close. So when you're creating digital platforms, you have to take into account physical needs of families. Thirdly, there is a need to acknowledge that there is a lot of stress and sometimes confusion among teachers when it comes to difficult circumstances as the ones we witnessed during the lockdown or during restrictions. Teachers had a huge feeling that they were not sure, they were unsure about what was happening, what was their obligations, what were their obligations, what were the limits, how they could continue having contacts with their pupils and students. Therefore, we need to make sure that there is an excellent support through these platforms to teachers and to families as well. So this again is important, especially when platforms are not working properly. And when I'm talking about families and parents, we should not forget that when we are discussing digital access to platforms, parents should know what is happening, what is the contents of these platforms, and also they should be supported as well. We should also think that there are certain families that do not have the possibility of staying at home. They still have to go working and they need special care for children. So this also we have to take into account when we are organizing different Go Digital programs. Again, it has to do with the needs of specific families. There is as well a school dropout during restrictions such as the lockdown and the closing of schools. So school dropout is something, or actual learning dropout, if pupils do not take part in these platforms, if teachers cannot provide solutions for this, this is extremely important. And also we should make sure that in these platforms there is a possibility for children to actually say if they are experiencing violence when schools are restricted or closed. So there is an opportunity for platforms to make sure that there is a freedom of speech, freedom of talk. Children, students, pupils feel safe to discuss with their teachers, and all this in a hub or in a platform should be taken into account. So access and participation through digital platforms is not a luxury, not anymore at least. It should be inclusive, taking into account the needs of all, and we should listen to what has happened in the last months and make sure we become better.